Welcome to episode 2 of Dan and Dave Discuss Boxing. Today we're going to be talking about our favourite boxers of our time. As much as I love the old school fighters, I don't think you can relate to them in the same way as boxers that you've watched live and followed their career. So Dave, let's get cracking.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, really, I started loving boxing from quite a young age, probably about 10. I remember watching it on TV with my dad. And
what's that, like 1950?
Yeah. I can't remember. No, 1981. So yes, a long time ago, very long time ago. But in those days, there was a lot of boxing on TV. It was a very, like it is now. It's kind of almost come back to that era. I think in between, from the 90s to the early 2000s, it wasn't as popular. But in the early 80s, it was on TV all the time. And I remember watching. There used to be this sort of amateur contest between the home nations, home countries, Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales. I think it was on ITV. It's just an amateur competition, and it was great. And it was on prime time TV. I used to love watching that. But one of the earliest memories I've got really is following Barry McGuigan.
Barry McGuigan. Oh man, I mean
featherweight. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great fighter. I mean, but before we get on Barry McGuigan, I just got to say how jealous I am of the fact that you grew up in the 80s, because the 80s is just one of the greatest decades of all time. I mean, you got the four kings: Hagler, Hearns, Duran, Leonard. You got
Absolutely,
and
the heavyweight era as well.
Yeah,
and it was proper scraps, and a lot of the fights went 15 rounds as well those days.
Oh man, I mean the 80s was one of those great eras, probably one of the all-time greats. From heavyweight all the way down to the lower weights. You had guys like Salvador Sanchez, Alexis Arguello, even Ray Mancini, Aaron Pryor, just so many great fights. But as you've touched upon, Barry McGuigan's one of your personal favourites.
Yeah, but because it was very exciting to watch, very fast, and it seemed like a nice guy as well, came across well. And in those days, I mean, there weren't that many British fighters, or I mean, I know he's Irish, but there weren't many fighters that you could root for in those days. It was very much dominated by America and Latin countries, so it's changed quite a lot in that respect. So he was pretty famous, when I was growing up. He was very well known and on TV all the time. Maybe if he was fighting now, it wouldn't be so much, because there's a lot more other fighters that people would watch. But he did have a very exciting style, very, very quick, good footwork, and he did pack a punch for a small guy.
You know what? It's funny. Look, watching McGuigan. I mean, I read his book and I've watched lots of his fights since. And when I kind of was getting into boxing, probably over a decade ago, you see McGuigan, you see this little guy. You know, like the moustache. Not a threatening looking guy.
No, he wasn't,
but God, he could fight, menacing, man. Menacing. Always on the front foot, excellent body puncher, excellent left hook. Yeah. I think the thing with McGuigan as well that makes him so popular. I mean, you go. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail in a second. But his fight with Eusebio Pedrosa.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to mention. That particular fight is etched in my memory. It was 1985. Yeah, I was 14. In the summer, it was 8th of June, and I remember distinctly being at my mate's house, wanting to go home to watch the fight live, because I knew it would be a good fight.
Oh man!
And it didn't disappoint. It was fantastic. It was at QPR, wasn't it?
Yeah, Loftus Road. Yeah. I think. I mean, don't quote me off the top of my head, but something like 15 million viewers or something.
Yeah.
That might be.
It was huge. I mean, for a featherweight. It was a world title fight, wasn't it? Pedrosa was champ, wasn't it?
Pedrosa wasn't only the champ. He'd made 15 successful defences, which is more than anyone else in the history of that division. I can't remember the exact division.
And he was the favourite, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. He'd beaten the great Ruben Olivares, who's one of the all-time great Mexicans, albeit past his prime. Pedrosa was a great fighter, but I think McGuigan caught him at the right time. Yeah. And I think also, like, with McGuigan, that particular fight where he gets to it. Midway through, I think. Oh man! But I think with McGuigan, what made him such a big figure was also the time he was growing up in, the time he was at his peak in, the Troubles.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's known as the Clone Cyclone, but there's a famous quote that I read in his book, and it was "Leave the fighting to McGuigan." And I'm not, I'm not going to go too deeply into the political side of it, but I feel like at the time he was kind of someone that could unite people in a really troubling time.
Yeah. I think that did happen
In Ireland.
Definitely, I think that was the case. And you know, he, as I said, he was very entertaining. He came across well in interviews. He was well liked. But yeah, that's my sort of fond memories of boxing.
Yeah,
he was featured quite a lot in those days. Looking back now, he looks so old. I mean, they're looking at even the shorts they're wearing. They look like something that their mum had made.
Yeah,
just sewn together at home and just
plain in the plain gloves. But I prefer that than all the fancy.
Oh yeah,
gloves,
it's that gritty sort of like just basics, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's a good champion, McGuigan. Yeah. I mean, lost the title eventually to Steve Cruz.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a hot, very hot American. Was it in Vegas? I think
Vegas, outdoors, beating an Irish fella in the
and
desert.
There's a famous picture of McGuigan with his eyes vacant, this vacant look in his eyes because he was just dehydrated and just. Yeah. I don't know if that's the main reason he lost, but he did suffer in the heat, didn't he?
He suffered. I mean, I think that photo you were talking about won the photograph of the year or something. It was really intense.
This was what 20 years before he was born, and he still knows about little things like that.
I've read the book. Yeah, he's drenched in the water that they're pouring on him. But getting an Irish fella to box out in the desert is never a good idea. But great fight, great fight.
Yeah, he didn't. He was quite fair skinned as well. It was like it was a bit hard for him. But
I'm going to go on to my number 4. I'm going to name 4 of my favourite fighters. Now I could name 50. I've had to whittle this down to just some of the fighters that I kind of gravitated towards, or that provided just so much entertainment for me. And for number 4, I'm going to go with Carl the Cobra Froch.
Hey.
Yeah, I mean, we touched upon Froch in the last video. Froch was just, I think for me, he provided so much entertainment live. I loved his style. Froch had this kind of style that was down here when he could easily be clocked. And every time he took a shot on the chin, one of the greatest chins of all time, bear in mind, he'd just go,
I love that.
Yeah, he had this just unorthodox style. He used to put everything into every punch. Sometimes it looked clumsy, but it just worked a treat. Great fights against the likes of Jermaine Taylor. His fight against Mikhail Kessler's second one was just one of the best fights I've seen live. Yeah. It's the only time in boxing where I've actually been lifted off my seat is when George Groves dropped him in the first fight. I was like this.
Wow. This was so funny because you were like a kid then, really.
I was about 17, I think, 18.
That's funny. Cool, to me, it just seemed like it was last year, but
it's mad. I mean, and just people have mixed opinions on Froch, but for me, he just had such a great resume, underrated boxing skills, fought everyone, and just always in exciting fights. I mean, just provided so much excitement for me, and
he was definitely exciting to watch.
One of the toughest fighters of all time.
I don't really think he had a boring fight, did he?
No, Froch didn't. Froch, I mean, he had probably one easy fight as reigning champion when he fought Yusuf Mack, and I mean that's in about 10 fights, and he was more than entitled to take that fight because he was just fighting back to back killers. Yeah. Great fighter.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Oh well, for me. Another boxer I want to mention, it's quite an obvious one for this era, but it's Frank Bruno because whatever you say about him, he was good to watch. As a kid watching this guy, this most amazing physique, just never seen a boxer with such a ripped, muscular body as Bruno. And some say that did kind of hamper him a little bit. But as a kid watching someone like that, knocking people out is pretty impressive, and he was entertaining, very likeable guy, and I just found it very exciting watching his fights, just reading about him. Couldn't wait for the next one to come up. And finally, one of the fights I remember was not actually on TV. We didn't have Sky then. This one was on the radio. And it was Jerry Coetzee, the South African.
South African fellow.
But I remember listening to it, and in some ways, boxing on the radio is almost more exciting because you just hear the crowd and the commentator getting excited, and you're just putting the images together in your head.
Yeah. You have to use your imagination.
That's right. It was kind of more exciting because you're not sure what's happening. But I just remember Harry Carpenter just when he knocked him out, and he said he's on my lap or something like that.
Harry Carpenter, yeah, with the Tyson fight, he's like,
get him, Frank.
Yeah. No, I mean Frank Bruno was one of them. I mean, there's something about those vulnerable punchers that are just so exciting to watch. I think Amir Khan falls in a similar category. Not necessarily punchers, but someone that's very good aggressively, but vulnerable.
Takes that. If he's vulnerable to that one punch knockout.
Bruno could punch.
He was definitely one of the hardest hitters at that time.
One of the hardest hitters we've ever produced. Yeah, just in terms of sheer power.
But just that stamina and the chin. And one of the problems with Bruno, I think, was if he did get hit, he just sometimes he should have taken a knee or something, just like giving himself a break, but he just stood there as a punch bag, and the ref had no alternative. Like
the Tyson and the Lewis fights, he's kind of against the
same with Stone Crusher Swift thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was winning that fight, and then the last round, he was just.
Also, as well, it's got such a nice kind of climax to his story in regards to
he got there in the end.
Yeah, he got there in the end. He was up on the cards and he blew a couple of the title shots, and then eventually it was Oliver McCall who beat the title.
Oliver McCall.
Yeah, he did it.
And it was, I think that went the distance, didn't it? And it was a good fight, and he did well.
Oliver McCall was a really good fighter.
He was at that time. He used
to be Tyson's sparring partner.
Yeah.
And Bruno, we can't forget. Wobble Tyson, Wobble the prime
He did
Tyson.
definitely, in his prime as well, absolutely did stun him a little bit.
Yeah.
But it didn't last long.
No.
But it was impressive to watch. Again, I heard that on the radio in the early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
But well, after you talk about your next one, that'll bring me on to...
Yeah, so my next one, I'm going to go with someone that's still around today, someone that I just get so much joy from watching fight, but also the way he approaches the game, his achievements and resume still blows my mind. I just can't comprehend how someone can be able to compile all of these wins to very, very few losses. It's Vasily Lomachenko.
Oh well, yeah.
Oh man, I mean, as someone that enjoys, the craft of the sport as well as the history of the sport, Loma is just a treat to watch. I mean,
he is. I think that's a good way of putting it. A treat to watch. He's like very satisfying fighter to watch.
You know what? The thing with Vasily Lomachenko is, we'll start with his amateur career. 396 wins, one loss.
That's mad.
Yeah, he lost to Albert Selimov, who he avenged that defeat twice.
How many years was he fighting as an amateur? Because he's still relatively young, isn't he? He's not like over the hill. He's not like in his...
He's 35 now.
Yeah, so it's still pretty good age for a boxer.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, and I've heard the argument that who did he fight in the amateurs? Everyone. He's a 2-time Olympic champion, 2-time world champion, 2-time European champion, something like that.
He's only 35.
Yeah, and then he turned professional and wanted to become the fastest ever world champion in his second pro fight. It never been.
That was his aim, was it?
That was his aim.
To be the fastest.
And he boxed Orlando Salido. Yeah. Now, before he turned professional, he boxed in this thing called the World Boxing Series.
Yeah.
But this was different. This wasn't the World Boxing Super Series.
Right.
It was more like an amateur professional tournament. So
it was like all comers kind of thing.
Well, all the amateurs would do 5 pro rounds, 5 rounds, 3 minutes.
Right. Okay.
Joe Joyce did it. Joe Joyce boxed Usyk in it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and Lomachenko had 7 fights there, and they were no headgear, professional gloves.
Yeah.
They were kind of regarded as pro fights.
Yeah.
So some people say he had 7 pro fights going in, but officially he did have 1.
Right.
And he fought Orlando Salido, who came in over the weight division, a real veteran Salido, real dirty fighter. And Salido,
so that was officially his first professional fight.
Second.
Quite
he had a
deep end then, isn't it?
Yeah, oh mate, well that's the idea. That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
And he lost. But Salido hit him with about 25 low blows. It was really, you watch the fight, it's a real dirty fight. But then he went on to box Gary Russell Jr. for the world title in his next fight, who's a long reigning champion afterwards. Real slick, fast southpaw. And he beat him. And ever since, he's become the fastest 2-division champion in history and the fastest 3-division champion in history. Wow. He's boxed 10 world champions in 19 fights. In his first 19 fights, he's beat the likes of Guillermo Rigondeaux, who is one of the all-time great Cuban amateurs.
Cuban amateurs were something special.
Mate, but with Loma, it just the way he's so good defensively, he's got the greatest footwork. along with Orlando Canizales, who I'll show you. He's got the greatest footwork I've ever seen. He just pulls off these tricks that shouldn't be possible, and he's in a way kind of inspired a new generation of tricks. Like at the time he was becoming a big pound for pound star, so many people in the gyms were trying his tricks, his footwork, the way he pulled the guard down. He's just such a treat to watch, and always willing to fight the best.
And that's a sign of a proper good fighter, isn't it? I mean, not backing down.
Yeah.
And you don't see that so much nowadays, do you, really?
He steps in with Devin Haney next for the undisputed lightweight title.
Yeah, that's going to be a crackerjack, isn't it?
Let's see. I mean, it'll be a great fight.
Well, that's interesting, and very different fighters to the ones that I remember from childhood. And the final pick for me, again, another obvious one, but it's Mike Tyson, because similar reasons to Bruno in a way, but even more elevated. The excitement of watching Tyson live, and sadly you never had that experience.
No.
But getting up 3-4 in the morning to watch him fight as a 14, 15-year-old, there's nothing to come close to that for me. And he was just fantastic. I mean, watching him live beating the crap out of people was just so thrilling, and I loved his style. I loved the black shorts, no socks, no monkeying around, just getting straight into it. The ring walk wasn't even a ring walk, was it? It was just like, okay, I'm just going to get in,
it was like
do the job and get out again. Yeah,
the execution,
and it just, that was so classy, I thought, and it was so intimidating because, in a way, because he didn't need all that flashy stuff. I think that got into the opponent's heads even more, because they're thinking, right, he doesn't need any of this bravado, because you can see it in his eyes. He's just like here to do a job, and he would just pace around the ring like a caged tiger. And I used to sort of gulp at his neck, the thickness of his neck. I just thought, my God, look at that! He's just so strong. And
he's the most pitbull looking human ever.
Definitely. And he had that aggression of a pitbull as well, and the fear in the opponent's eyes. That every time whoever he fought in that era, they could try and pretend they weren't scared. You could see it. They go like, "Oh, all right," but you could see they're actually crapping themselves.
Yeah.
And he never. You would never say he was ever cautious at any point. Then it was always just like, what you see is what you get. He's not. Everyone knows what he's going to do. He didn't have to have a game plan or hide anything. It would just be go all out attack in a blaze of glory and just fists everywhere, and they could deal with it. And it was just,
that's such a difficult thing to do, just to go out and have no game plan, but just
but you that shows that confidence you got.
But that's what I mean. Just go for the knockout. You know you're going to get it. I mean, Tyson was just a phenomenal man. I mean, and to also, put into the fact that he was only 20 years old when he was doing this, the youngest heavyweight champion.
Well, that's it, and that's one of the fights. The strongest memories I've got is the Trevor Berbick fight, because that was the undisputed, wasn't it? And he suddenly.
Yeah, well, it wasn't undisputed. That was
his first world title.
That was the big one. Yeah.
21 was he?
20.
He was.
He was 20.
Still 20 then. So that's just crazy. Yeah. And he just he embarrassed the guy, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he blew him away. I mean, Berbick was a capable fighter. He'd beaten Muhammad Ali, who was well past.
Didn't Ali whisper in Tyson's ear?
Go get him. And also, I mean, it's just he blew him away. And ironically, he beat Floyd Patterson's record to become the youngest heavyweight champion of the world.
Right, okay.
Floyd Patterson was in his 20s as well, 21, I can't remember. Yeah. But Floyd Patterson, do you know who his trainer was?
No.
Cus D'Amato.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So he kind of found both Patterson and Tyson at a young age, and nurtured them into being the youngest heavyweight champion ever. But yeah, I mean, Prime Tyson is actually one of the most divisive characters in the boxing world, because people were saying, is he overrated? Is he great? He was a beast. like he was a freak of nature.
Yeah, a freak of nature. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, he was, and I mean, no matter what you think of the resume, you cannot deny the impact that guy had on the sport. And I mean, I think his greatest win is against Spinks.
Spinks, yeah.
Spinks,
and he was, because Spinks was not he was a decent fighter, and he
was a great fighter.
blasted him.
Spinks has a case of being the greatest light heavyweight of all time. I don't think he is the greatest, but one of. And then he went up and ended Larry Holmes' streak, beating him twice.
Yeah.
You know, undefeated, and Tyson just went out and blew him away in a round. Put the eyes in the top of his
Yeah,
head.
I remember that. It was almost a scary knockout, that one.
Yeah.
He just...
The thing with Tyson is, you know, a very insecure character at that time. From, you know, and he talks about it. You talk about how frightening and intimidating and confident he was. I've seen videos of Tyson talking about him being sick and crying before fights.
No, he was he had a very difficult upbringing, as a lot of them did, but his was particularly tough.
The genius of Cus D'Amato was he was able to channel that fear,
definitely
channel that, and drive him to being this menacing monster. Tyson was reading about Genghis Khan and Napoleon. You know, he had that mindset.
Yeah, and he was very interested in a lot of the earlier fighters, wasn't he? He didn't just. He wanted to learn about boxing and the history of boxing.
I mean, whenever I read about old fighters, you just hear Mike Tyson's favourite fighter.
Yeah.
You know, someone like Mickey Walker, the great middleweight of the 1920s, or just Alexis Arguello the other day. Tyson was a true historian.
Yeah, definitely. But it's such a shame that Cus passed away when he did, isn't it? Because
you know what? That's what I was going to say. Like, Cus kind of knew how to work him. As soon as Cus passed away, all of those kind of weaknesses he had were massively exploited by all the leeches. And he had Don King, the whole thing with Robin Gibbons.
This is it,
yeah, and I mean, he had so many people. The most famous and, you know, the most divisive character in the world, athlete in the world, and he had all of these people just leeching off him. And I mean, you know, the amount of his life, he's lived about 3 lives, Tyson. You know,
he really has.
Yeah, but you know, I love listening to him talk now. He's really, you know, turned into this kind of philosophical.
Oh, he has. I think he always had that side. I mean, when you see him demolish the opponents in his peak, he always showed compassion for them afterwards, didn't he? He always went over and said, "Oh, you're right," you know. So he did have that side in him. Obviously, there's another side to him as well, but like you say, very divisive. But certainly, as a kid watching him fight, it was the most exciting time, and I'm grateful to him for that, for providing that kind of fun for me and my mates. You know, we just loved it. Loved talking about it.
A great fighter and one of the most iconic boxers of all time, and a very, very intelligent human being.
So that's my 3.
Yeah.
So who's your third pick then?
Well, I'm going to do 2 more because I have my number 1 slot.
You're
but
sticking it to 3.
I had to get him in. And number 2, I'm going to go with Irish Mickey Ward. Not the greatest fighter of all time, but the greatest warrior I've ever seen. I mean, Mickey Ward had about 16, 17 losses. Oh, yeah, you've seen the fight with Arturo Gatti.
Before we record this, Dan was showing me the fight with Gatti. The first one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, my God, if you haven't seen that fight, Ward v Gatti, number 1. Have a look at that.
Well, all 3. I mean, they had this incredible trilogy, the greatest trilogy of all time. But the thing I love about Mickey Ward is those were his last 3 fights. He'd had about 60 fights up to then. He was earning no money. He was working, I think he was paving the streets off the top of my head. You know, he was a real, not a journeyman fighter, but, you know, he wasn't getting the big fights. He was fighting for a couple of thousand. Right. He had this fight against this big puncher. He lost 4 in a row, I think. Jeez. And he had to take a couple of years out of the ring because he just couldn't live on what he was doing.
And I suppose as a professional boxer, you lose 4 in a row, all your sort of sponsors are printing out and things like that. They're thinking, well, you know, and you're not getting the big fights.
No, I mean,
it's hard to earn the money.
That's it. And he was like 30 fights deep into his career at this time. So he took 3-4 years out, built a little bit of a comeback, built a bit of momentum, and then they put him in with this Mexican killer. Like he's a stepping stone for this Mexican killer called Alfonso Sanchez. 16-0 and 15 knockouts, I think. And Sanchez absolutely batters him for like 8 rounds. And then he pulls out that bang, bang, left hook to the body, just ends him. Like that. It's one of the greatest comebacks ever.
Oh man, I've got to see that.
Oh, I'll show you. And then he boxes Shane Neary for a version of the world title, a real tough fighter, beats him, has one of the all-time great fights against the drunken master, Emmanuel Augustus. It's up there with Gatti Ward. People don't know about it, but it's up there with Gatti Ward. A little 10-rounder in, I think it's on the Boardwalk Hall, I'm not sure. and then he has that trilogy with Arturo Gatti. He earns the millions finally. And those 3 fights are just as good as boxing gets. All 3 of them. The first one's the best, but all 3 of them are just amazing. And Mickey Ward is just one of my favourites.
Brilliant. And you said that he kind of inspired you a little bit in your career.
Yeah.
You certainly learned a lot from him, or
I learned my left hook to the body from Mickey Ward.
Right,
I remember watching The Fighter, which is the film about Mickey Ward's life with Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale. And I just remember seeing just that left hook to the body, the Alfonso Sanchez knockout. I'm like, God, how can you do that? And I would practice it, and it became my best punch. I became known as a body puncher.
Yeah, wow.
But number 1, Gennady Golovkin.
Triple G.
How long have we got?
Yeah, you could do a whole 45 minutes on that one man, I suppose, couldn't you, easily? But
I've never enjoyed a fighter or as much as Gennady Golovkin. He is without a doubt by far my favourite ever. I mean, let's start with the amateur record: 350 fights, 345 wins, world champion, Olympic silver medalist, and then just
he had that intimidation factor as well, didn't he? Because I mean, he was at his peak, invincible, and a knockout artist as well, wasn't he?
One of the most avoided fighters of all time, and he was extremely intimidating in the ring, but one of the least intimidating people out of the ring.
Yeah. You wouldn't think it, would you? He seems like such a gentle, humble sort of character, and
he does, and I think that's why another reason I liked him so much, because I could relate to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I first watched Golovkin against this low-level guy called Lajuan Simon.
Right.
It was on Box Nation. There was about 200 people in the venue, and he just slipped bang through this left hook in the first round, and the guy just folded, and then he just embarked on that crazy 23 fight knockout streak. It just
23 consecutive.
23 consecutive knockouts. There's about 16 world title fights in there.
That's unheard of for his weight division as well.
Oh mate, it's just crazy. And I studied so much of Triple G style. You know, anyone that would train with me in those days, they used to call me they call me Golovkin. They say you're starting to box a bit like Golovkin, and it was all done on purpose. I practiced the footwork and the way he would throw his shots. Just a perfect fighter, and sadly I think he was so avoided in his prime. He never got the big fights until he fought box Canelo, and then I think he was robbed against Canelo in the first one personally.
Yeah, that was a controversial one, wasn't it? I mean, for me, I could have given it either way. But I can see why you think he was robbed.
I think the second one could have gone either way, but I think Golovkin was a clear winner in the first. I mean, I remember coming up and just thinking, like, I hope this guy, because he was just so destructive and so dominant. I just remember thinking, I hope this guy has a good chin, so he doesn't get knocked out. And he has a good chin. Trust me, he proved that. He's got one of the all-time great chins.
I remember Kell Brook.
Kell Brook,
Kell Brook fought him, didn't he? Is that the fight where he smashed his eye, or did he have the injury before that? I can't remember now.
No. So Golovkin was the first time he broke his orbital bone. And then Errol Spence broke the other one.
Yeah, but that fight with Kell Brook, because Brook did look like early on he was troubling him, and he hit him with a lot of punches, and I thought, geez, this guy, Golovkin's just not flinching.
Yeah, I mean,
and that really, to me, showed his chin.
Yeah, I mean, I was at that fight.
Were you?
It was literally a bucket list dream to see Golovkin live. And Charlie Edwards, who I used to train with at Epsom, he was on the undercard.
Right.
So Tony Roberts, I'll always thank Tony Roberts for this. Got me, my granddad, my mum, and my friend, my brother 5 tickets when they were they were really tight to get hold of. He gave me 5. So I'll always thank Tony Roberts for doing that, because that was one of my dreams.
Oh, fantastic!
Tyson Fury is Golovkin for me.
Yeah.
But 396 fights I think he's had now. Golovkin, he's never been dropped.
That's tough.
Yeah, one of the most durable champions ever, one of the most formidable middleweights. But I could go on all day. Those are our favourite fighters of our time.
Fighters of our time, and long in the memory, and fond memories too. And thankfully we've got YouTube. We can look back and see them anytime we want.
I mean, I'll be watching some more Barry McGuigan fights.
Yeah. I'm going to definitely check out some Mickey Wards.
So in for a treat, man. So that's the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe and comment, and even share the videos.
Yeah.
Make sure you tune into the next one.
Just what you said. Bye.
So.